What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for Arrow Season 7, Episode 22, titled You Have Saved the City. This is the season finale of this season, although it kind of feels more like a series finale, despite the fact that it is not actually one. But anyway, let's get into the review. It will be a little different. I won't go like storyline by storyline. I'll go more scene by scene, not go over every single scene, but I'll go over the important scenes and say what I think about them, as well as maybe a little speculation here or there. I'm guessing this video will be a little longer than usual because it is the season finale. So anyway, let's get into the review. The episode starts off right where the last episode ends, where Team Arrow are on this roof and the police are right there as well. There is a conflict there for a little bit, but I thought it would last a lot longer in this episode, as well as in the next 20 years of this universe. I thought there would be some sort of conflict between Team Arrow and the police going forward, but it seems like that conflict is over, as we see later in the episode, so there's not really much to go on there. Speaking of not much to go on, I'm not going to really talk about the flash forwards very much, except for the ending of the flash forwards, because I have nothing to say at all, other than the fact that I don't like it. I think it takes away from the episode. Every time they cut back to it, it really took away from the pacing of the episode as a season finale, considering it has absolutely nothing to do with the present day whatsoever. I don't like the storyline in general, and there's not really much to talk about outside of that, and I don't want to be too negative in this video because I have a lot of problems with this episode, and the main one are the flash forwards, and that's all I'll talk about those scenes. While Team Arrow were on this mission, it seemed like Felicity called for some extra help in Laurel and Curtis, and honestly, these two did not need to be in this episode at all. They don't add anything to the episode, and don't get me wrong, I really like seeing Laurel as the Black Canary on screen, especially the shot right after she appears where Team Arrow show up. You see Green Arrow, Arsenal, and Black Canary, and it is pretty awesome to see like these three characters who used to be Team Arrow, and these are the main characters of Team Arrow in the past. It was pretty awesome to see, but other than that, Laurel did not do anything in this episode at all, but I don't really have any problem with her in this episode. She was cool, and she didn't need to be there, but it was cool to see her. As for Curtis, he did not need to be in this episode at all, and he honestly shouldn't have. He added absolutely nothing. He didn't suit up as Mr. Terrific, which would have been cool to see with this huge Team Arrow that they have. It would have been cool if they added Mr. Terrific as well. He just didn't need to be in the episode at all. I don't have a problem with him being in the episode, but I don't understand why they brought him back, and it's really puzzling to me. I get that as a series finale, they wanted to have this character there, but he did not add anything to the episode at all, and this is not actually a series finale, so I just do not get it. But anyway, Team Arrow go out into the field to stop and find Amigo Queen and the Night Circle. They have all these drones that they need to stop in a pretty cheesy scene where they do stop all of it. I mean, Oliver Queen does use, I'm pretty sure, freeze arrows, which he's never used before, which is really cool. I really want to see that. I really want to see him use more flaming arrows, electricity arrows, and freeze arrows, as well as the boxing glove arrows. Those arrows would be so cool to see on the show, but they don't really do them that much. So when they do, like here with the freeze arrows, it is pretty cool to see, despite the fact that it's only on drones and not on actual people or things like that. But this scene was cool because of the Team Arrow that we see. It's genuinely the biggest Team Arrow we've ever seen, and it's awesome to watch because although it wouldn't work like every episode of a season, this is the season finale, and having a Team Arrow this large, I'm pretty sure they had a very similarly sized Team Arrow back in Season 5's finale. It's pretty cool to watch. Here you have Bronze Tiger as well, which also really works on this team. He's a great addition to this episode. He does add a lot to this episode, especially in the fight scenes, and I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, Team Arrow regroup for a couple minutes, and pretty early on into the episode, they go into the climax of the fight between themselves and the Ninth Circle, although the Ninth Circle are continuing into the next season, which I do not like whatsoever, and I might talk about that in a completely separate video where I go over the main villains of Season 8. But anyway, this comes really early into the episode because of other things that the episode had to do, like say farewell to Felicity, as well as everything to do with the Monitor and his deal with Oliver, which I did expect this to happen for the main villain to be defeated so early or this early into the episode, and yet I do think that it's really weird for the pacing of the episode. Even though I did see it coming, it's really weird for them to defeat Amigo Queen and the Ninth Circle, or not really defeat them, but at least get over with the conflict of this episode so early on into the episode. I really have no complaints about that, but just I think it feels a little bit weird with the pacing. But anyway, I don't think it really bothers me at all. But the fight scenes here between the Team Arrow and the Ninth Circle are really good, like top notch, especially with both Arsenal and, again, especially Bronze Tiger. For some reason, I think Michael J. White, the actor who plays him, is so good in the fight scenes. Like, I think he does his own stunts, and you can clearly see it. He's too like smooth in the fights, and the use of his claws work so well. Like, he didn't have those in the Slapside Redemption, and here he does, or at least I'm pretty sure he didn't have those, and it's just so awesome to watch. I'm hoping in the next 10 episodes of the show we do see a little bit more of him. But again, also Arsenal has some pretty great fighting moments as well. The fight here between Team Arrow and the Night Circle was pretty great. This is where we learn Amigos Plan, or I think we learned it earlier in the episode, but this is where we see it come to fruition, which is just to blow up parts of Star City, which is very underwhelming, very uninspired, and it's very unoriginal as well. I mean, it's been done before, and there's no real tension there because we know what's going to happen to Star City, we know where it's going, and we know how it's going to be, and I don't really care about how it gets there, especially like with the destruction of it all, or how it went to hell, because we know where it's going, which is why I really think they should have brought all of the conflict to the outside of Star City, which has only ever been done once in the season 5 finale, which I think it would have worked here as well, or at least I think it would have. I don't know, but I think the final fight between Green Arrow and the Red Arrow it's fine. I mean, it's not a great final climax between the main hero and the main villain. In fact, it might be one of the worst on the show. I think the one between Green Arrow and Diaz was honestly better, which came in this season as well, but even the one in the finale of season 6, it was better than this. Doesn't really feel like there's a lot of tension there. There's not a lot of conflict, honestly. I mean, the conflict is there, where the scene where Oliver tells Amigo that he wanted to murder her, that was a great scene with some great acting from Oliver, or I mean from Stephen Amell, but I mean the actual tension there wasn't really much of it. The actual fight was good, like the choreography and the way they shot it was all pretty fun to watch, but for the most part, this was not a great ending to, or not a great conflict and rivalry between the main hero and the main villain whatsoever. It just didn't feel like there was any tension or actual stakes. Now, that being said, there is an entirely new villain swap in this episode. After the season already went through 2 villain swaps, having Diaz be the main villain for a while, then he switched out for Dante, who is not really the main villain at all, but it feels like he's the boss of Amico, who turns out to be the main villain of this season. And then another villain swap, the third one in this season, happens in the last 20 minutes of the last episode, the last 20 minutes of the season, when Oliver somehow convinces Amico to change her ways. And then it turns out that there is a new character. I don't even know her name, but this new character who is, I guess, the actual head of the Night Circle, or somebody who now thinks herself the head of the Night Circle and probably will be the main villain of the next season, which sounds pretty lame. But then there's another villain swap where Red Arrow or Amico Queen completely turns against them at the very last minute and fights alongside the Green Arrow. Now, it was pretty cool to see Green Arrow and Red Arrow fight alongside each other, because it is a superhero duo, like hero and sidekick from the comics, but it doesn't really work in this episode that much because we know her as a complete villain and terrorist who has killed a lot of people in the name of hurting Oliver Queen and the Queen name and everything like that. So I don't think it worked here. The redemption for Amico completely came out of nowhere. Like, it's the opposite of Daenerys in Game of Thrones in the last week. It completely comes out of nowhere, where instead of her turning bad, she turns good at the very last minute and somehow in some way says sorry to Oliver and tells Oliver to keep Felicity and their baby away from the Night Circle because they might hurt them. It's a complete character change. It comes out of nowhere. It just does not feel earned at all. That being said, the actual scene where Oliver convinces her and has this whole big speech to her, it's a pretty great scene. Great acting from Stephen Amell. I think this was one of Stephen Amell's best episodes. He had a lot of great moments of emotion, a lot of great moments of speeches, and a lot of great action scenes as well. This was a great episode for him, but not really for a lot of other characters. I mean, a lot of other characters did have some great moments, but as a whole, this episode is definitely not one of the better season finales, despite the fact that Stephen Amell kind of gave his all. Right after Amico dies, however, in a very non-emotional death scene, a very cheesy death scene, and not a very well-acted death scene on I forgot her name, but the actress who plays Amico, she's not a very good actress, and she doesn't do a very good job in this scene either. But right after that, the building blows up, and you have one of the coolest action scenes ever from Arrow. Although it is only like a split second, Oliver jumps out of the thing and you see him in this right in front of the building in the explosion, or right about to get out of the explosion. It looks so cool. It really reminds me of the first episode of season 5 where he jumped out of the building and there was an explosion behind him. This is very similar, and it looks just as cool. I really wish we got more of scenes like this on the show, but I'm guessing it probably cost a lot of money to do. But just like that, I think maybe like 25-26 minutes into the episode, I didn't really check, but that is it for the conflict with the main villain, which is unprecedented. It's insane that that happened this early into the episode, but again, I did expect that. We had a lot of scenes where like farewells between Oliver, Felicity, and the rest of Team Arrow as they are now moving to wherever they now live. It really helped they explain, like they say where they live. Maybe it's a city from DC Comics, but anyway, you have all these farewells, which are genuinely emotional. I mean, they really feels like they set this episode up to be a series finale, which they've done before in season 3. That episode also, the finale felt like a series finale, but while that was all the way back in season 3, not exactly a season where you want to end a show. Season 7 is pretty deep into a show, and this would have been a great season finale if it wasn't for Crisis on Infinite Earths, where you know there has to be some more to do with that. That being said, if this was a series finale, this was definitely a good one, as you have all these like farewells between the characters, the reminiscing over their past, and Oliver saying how his biggest legacy and his best creation, or at least one of his best creations, is Team Arrow. All of that is great. It really hit some great emotional beats, and I actually really liked it. And the scene at the end where Stephen Amell is crying again, it's one of his best acting scenes, or not scenes, but episodes in a very long time, and I'm really glad to see. But that cuts to kind of the epilogue of this episode, where we see Oliver and Felicity move into their new house. After that, there's a whole montage where Oliver and Felicity move into their new house. Felicity gives birth to Mia, and then they raise Mia for probably like 5 or 6 months before going into probably like right into season 8 in the next episode, which is coming out in like half a year. But anyway, I do think this montage, I mean, I expected to hate it. I expected to completely roll my eyes and scoff at every moment of this montage, but honestly, I didn't. I kind of liked it. I thought it really worked. I thought they handled it very well for this episode. It was honestly pretty emotional, and don't get me wrong, I still hate Felicity, and I hate the fact that they exist, and it really bothers me that this is how Arrow is going to end, with Felicity and Oliver being a thing, and they have children in the future. But at the same time, I mean, outside of that, this was a very emotional montage, and if it was like Dinah or Laurel or any version of Black Canary, this would have been so perfect for an ending to Arrow. Though again, it's not the ending. This would have been such a great ending to Arrow as a show, or maybe the second to last season, where the last season kind of feels like an epilogue to the entire show. If this was Laurel or Dinah or any Black Canary, it would have been perfect, but it isn't those characters. It is Felicity, which is why this is not perfect, but it is still a pretty emotional scene where you see Oliver holding Mia, his baby, in his arms. It was pretty sad because you know where that is going to go. You know, Oliver is not going to be around in her life, and it's pretty sad just to see. I did get a little bit emotional at that moment, and I genuinely did not dislike this montage at all. I actually kind of liked it, and that led into a even better moment and an even better part of the episode where the Monitor finally returns. This is what I was excited for. This is what I was anticipating the most in this episode, and it really delivered. I think everything to do with Oliver and the Monitor, the deal that they made, which turns out they didn't really make a deal. It's just that Monitor said that Oliver has to do something for the multiverse, and Oliver said fine, and then Monitor's like, I'll tell you what that is in a year or so, or maybe like 8 months. I don't really know how long there is between Elseworlds and now, or it's probably an entire year or something, but anyway, that doesn't matter. So it turns out there was no deal in the end, which is a little weird. I don't really understand why they did that. They could have said that they made a deal, but at the same time, I think it really works because it didn't really feel like Oliver was, or knew he was going to die the entirety of the season. It didn't really feel like he knew that this was his last couple years on Earth, and I think this works because of it, because now he knows he's going to die, and you can see that he is genuinely distraught over the fact that that is going to happen. I think, again, Stephen Amell completely knocks it out of the park in this this episode with moments like this. The moment that he was told he was going to die in the crisis event coming up, he was so shocked and taken aback, and I was as well because of the acting. It was so good in that moment, and this whole big sequence of events where we are told as an audience that Oliver is going to die. It's not shocking, it's not surprising, but it works so well for this moment, especially when it turns out that he might actually not. Now, I am kind of torn about what happened here at the end of the flash forwards. I mean, I do think this is the first time the flash forwards have genuinely been useful or of value at all on this show, but at the same time, it does kind of take away a little bit from the actual crossover. It confirms that the Monitor is not going to die or nothing's going to happen to him in the crossover. This also confirms that the world is going to be okay, which I guess we already knew. I mean, there's no reason to think that it wouldn't be, but I think that the fact that it confirms now that Oliver is not going to die, or he is somewhere else, or there's some sort of other thing going on here. I do think they probably shouldn't have done that, but at the same time, I do really like the moment where they're all talking about Oliver and they see his gravestone, and I do really like the moment where Felicity goes into the portal to wherever Oliver is, and it works really well for this episode, and we'll just have to find out how well it works for the actual crossover. But again, I am pretty torn about what's happening here, but at least I can say that this is the first time that the flashbacks have contributed at all to this show. In conclusion, this episode is nowhere near as good as the best season finales of the show. I mean, it's not even close. This episode has a lot of flaws in the fact that it's pretty underwhelming for the most part. The conflict between the main hero and the main villain is just not good, and there are certain characters who don't need to be in the episode, despite the fact that they are enjoyable. They don't necessarily need to be around, and obviously the flash forwards completely take away from the episode so much, except for the last two scenes. So as a whole, this episode has a lot of flaws, but there are also a lot of great things about it, like the fight scenes, like the Monitor, and like the montage at the end, which was genuinely emotional despite or in spite of Felicity. The Team Arrow teaming up was a lot of fun to watch as well, but as a whole, it's not a great season finale. It's more like a good season finale, and as such, I'll give it a 9 out of 10, which is a pretty high score for a good episode, as it is a pretty great score, but for a season finale, it's not very high, and I would expect a little bit more from this show, but I do kind of blame it on the setup of the season, which did not do a very good job at setting up the conflict between the main hero and the main villain, especially since the main villain did not appear until way too late, or at least she didn't appear as a villain until way too late. So that is it for this video. Let me know in the comments and in the poll in the top right corner of the video what you thought about this episode. And now that Season 7 is officially over, I will be making a season review, so stay tuned for that. It's probably going to come out in like a week, or maybe a little bit less than that. But anyway, let me know your thoughts, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.